Welcome to All Access Med School Admissions. I'm Christian Essman, and I'm coming to you from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. While this is the first full episode, I'm actually not going to be interviewing anyone today, but I do have a great lineup coming soon of cool guests, and I'm super excited to get them out to you, so stay tuned. But in this episode, you're just going to get me. The theme of this episode is medical school application lingo and a summary of the application process. I don't feel like I can just jump into this podcast show and assume that every listener is well-versed in medical school application jargon. We may have listeners that are eager high school students or freshmen that are just thinking about the pre-med track. We might have international students that are unfamiliar with the U.S. system for applying to medical school, or just some people that want to brush up on this stuff. This is going to give you an overview of some of the terms and phrases that you're likely going to hear in future episodes when I'm actually interviewing my medical school admissions friends. I think it's important to provide you with this foundation so that during an interview, I can avoid breaking up the flow of the conversation. I don't want to have to take a time out during an interview and say, hey, stop, let's explain that acronym you just used. My goal during these interviews is to keep them really organic and as natural as possible. It's as if you're kind of secretly listening in on our conversations. I'm going to start this episode by giving you a really high-level explanation of the medical school application glossary of terms that admissions people use on a daily basis. And then I'm going to walk you through the application timeline. It takes a little over a year to apply to medical school. It's a really long and some people might argue somewhat seemingly inhumane application process. Let's get into the application lingo. Okay, we're going to start with the really high level stuff and then we're going to get a little granular just to get you familiar with some of our terminology. First of all, let's just start by talking about straight up medicine. In particular, the types of medicine that's practiced in the United States. I mean, there are literally two schools of thought on this. There are two types of practicing physicians in the United States. There are allopathic physicians, so those are your MDs, and osteopathic physicians, and those are your DOs. Both are fully licensed physicians, and they're trained in diagnosing and treating illnesses and disorders and in providing preventative care. The first term, allopathic medicine. There are currently 154 allopathic medical schools in the United States. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines allopathic medicine as a system of medical practice that aims to combat disease by the use of remedies, as in drugs or surgery, producing effects different from or incompatible with those produced by the disease being treated. Overall, the term allopathic medicine refers broadly to the medical practice that is sometimes termed Western medicine or evidence-based medicine or modern medicine. Students who go to an allopathic medical school ultimately receive an MD degree. Osteopathic medicine, on the other hand, began as a 19th century health reform movement that emphasized preventative care and allowing the body to heal without the overuse of medications. As a little history lesson, osteopathic medicine was created as an alternative in healthcare that emphasizes preventative care and the integration of the body's systems. While many of the osteopathic schools still emphasize these principles in their training today, essentially MDs and DOs practice medicine in identical ways. Like allopathic physicians, osteopathic physicians prescribe medications, perform surgeries, and practice in specialty areas. However, osteopathic physicians are trained in some special areas in which allopathic physicians do not receive training. Students in osteopathic medical colleges receive training called osteopathic manipulative treatment, or OMT, that MDs don't receive. OMT involves using the hands to diagnose and treat illness or injury. I think all pre-med students should educate themselves about both allopathic and osteopathic medicine. If you one day become an MD, you'll likely work alongside DOs, and vice versa. So you should become informed about their training and practice. I think you should try and shadow both types of physicians too. The next term is AAMC. This stands for the Association of American Medical Colleges. Their website is aamc.org, and if it isn't bookmarked already, you should have bookmarked it yesterday. The AAMC essentially governs and supports everything in medical education, from medical school through residency. The AAMC is a big deal. They set policy, coordinate the application process, develop and administer the MCAT, and provide an enormous amount of education and resources for people like you, prospective applicants, and medical students. You can literally burn hours away pouring through their website, so I would recommend go burn some hours away pouring through their website. AMCAS is next. AMCAS stands for the American Medical College Application Service, and it's run by the AAMC. It's a centralized medical school application processing system. This is sometimes referred to as the primary application or the AMCAS primary. Much like the common application that you may have completed when you were applying to college as a high school student, it's very similar in that it's kind of a one-stop shop application for applying to medical schools. You basically have to document your entire life history. And if you thought the common application was exhaustive, brace yourself. AMCAS is a beast. In fact, they have an 84-page guidebook to help you through the process, and I think it's considered required reading. There are 9 sections that capture your biographic and family background, coursework, work and activities, letters of recommendation, essays, which includes the personal statement, your MCAT score, and it's also where you choose the medical schools to which you want to apply. Everything about AMCAS can be found on aamc.org. The MSAR is next. The MSAR stands for Medical School Admissions Requirements. Oh my gosh, this is probably the best site in the pre-med world. It is an incredible resource that contains detailed profiles for each allopathic medical school in the U.S. It has some really user-friendly features that allow you to search for schools, compare schools, set deadline reminders in your calendar, all kinds of cool stuff. Most importantly, though, unlike some guides and resources from for-profit companies, the information in the MSAR comes directly from us and the AAMC. When I say us, I mean admissions people. Every year, I have to update the MSAR for our school's information. The bottom line is, it is chock full of solid info and accurate data. You can access a fair amount of the MSAR information for free, but if you want to get the full access, it costs $28. I think this might be the best $28 you spend in the entire process. And if you have a pre-med advisor, they likely have access to the MSAR, so you might be able to give it a little test drive before you go and get your own account. Let's talk about the MCAT. The MCAT stands for the Medical College Aptitude Test. The MCAT is a standardized, multiple-choice, computer-based examination for prospective medical students in the United States, Australia, Canada, and the Caribbean islands. It is designed to assess problem-solving, critical thinking, written analysis, and knowledge of scientific concepts and principles. The MCAT tests examinees on the skills and knowledge that medical educators, physicians, medical students, and residents have identified as key prerequisites for success in medical school and, of course, the practice of medicine. The content is divided into 4 sections. 1. Biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. 2. Chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. 3. Psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. And 4. Critical analysis and reasoning skills. The AAMC develops the MCAT exam and administers it multiple times each year. It usually begins about late January, and the administrations go through about mid-September at hundreds of test sites throughout the United States and Canada, and in some select locations throughout the world. The basic registration fee for the MCAT is $315, and this covers the cost of the exam, as well as the distribution of your scores to the schools to which you choose to apply. You will receive 5 results from your MCAT exam, 1 for each of the 4 sections, and then a combined total score. Each of the 4 section scores will range from a lowest score of 118 to the highest or maximum score of 132. Scores for the 4 sections are then combined to create a total score. The total score ranges from the lowest score being a 472 to the highest or maximum score of a 528. These scores typically arrive about 30 to 35 days after your exam date. Again, you can get a ton of information about the MCAT on the AAMC site, so get back to that aamc.org. Okay, let's talk about letters of recommendation, or sometimes we call them LORs. Schools have varying requirements as to how many letters of recommendation and the types of letters they want to receive on the behalf of an applicant. So I would recommend going to the medical school's specific websites to find out, or the MSAR for that matter, to find out what types of letters of recommendation they require as a part of their application process. Let's talk about the BCPM, or Biology, Chemistry, Physics, and Mathematics, also known as your Science GPA. As a part of the AMCAS application, you have to basically do data entry of your entire college and graduate transcript and put it into AMCAS. Then for medical schools, AMCAS breaks down your academic history into picture 3 columns. On the far left, you have BCPM, so your Biology, Chemistry, Physics, and Mathematics, so your Science GPA. Down the middle column, you have what's called AO, all others, all non-science courses. And on the far right column, you have the cumulative GPA. Then they also break it down for us longitudinally. We can see your GPA from your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year, any post-baccalaureate coursework you may have done, and then ultimately your cumulative undergraduate GPA. Remember earlier when we talked about AMCAS and I said it was sometimes referred to as the primary application or AMCAS primary? We call it this because there are also secondary applications in this application process. Secondary applications are very school specific and they're sent to applicants from individual medical schools. Now, some medical schools will pre-screen the AMCAS application in order to send out the secondary, while other medical schools send their secondary out to all applicants. It just depends from school to school. The additional information required in a secondary may include some additional biographic info or additional essays. Sometimes there are no essays. I've seen some with 1 essay, and I've seen as many as 12 essays. So get ready, you're going to be doing a lot of writing in this application process. All right, let's move on to some of the terminology used in medical school curricula. Let's begin with the basic sciences. This is sometimes referred to as the preclinical years. These are science classes during the first 2 years of medical school before students embark on clinical rotations. These classes may include topics like pathology, microbiology, embryology, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, neuroanatomy, and pharmacology, among many others. The next word I want to familiarize you with is the term rotations or clinical rotations. This is the time period during a medical education, particularly in the 3rd or 4th year, when students are in the hospitals getting that learning experience, working with patients and understanding medicine, pulling it all together from the first 2 years and seeing medicine in practice. Rotations in the 3rd year usually try to give you a snapshot of a little bit of everything. Over a duration or a course of, say, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, seeing a little bit of surgery for 6 weeks and seeing some pediatrics and OBGYN and family medicine and geriatrics and internal medicine and a variety of other specialties. So the 3rd year is a way of giving you an exposure now, get you out of the classroom and get you into the hospital to start seeing patients and their disease processes. The next phrase you're likely going to hear us talk about is the boards. And what we mean by that is it refers to there's a 3-step medical certification process that medical students have to participate in, and it's called the United States Medical Licensing Examination, or USMLE. The boards typically refers to Step 1. So there's Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3. Step 1 boards take place usually after the 2nd year of medical school, going into the 3rd year. And this is a big time test. A lot of students spend a lot of time preparing for this, and some schools carve out study time for medical students to prepare for Step 1. So this is the first big licensure examination that medical students have to take. It's a big deal. The next term I want to tell you about is residency. This is post-medical school graduate training in a specific specialty. So for example, it might be obstetrics, general surgery, or radiology. So a resident is a physician in post-medical school training. For example, if you want to be a pediatrician someday, you have to complete all 4 years of medical school and then go on to a 3-year residency in pediatrics. So while you're in your residency, you are a licensed doctor and you'll be specializing in pediatrics and called a pediatric resident. To get to residency, you have to go through a process called the match. So that's the last term I want to tell you about. The match is a process by which senior medical students, typically 4th years, are paired or matched with their residency preferences and the residency program's selections. This is an entirely different application process that fourth-year medical students have to go through, and it also requires a very similar application process like the one you're about to go through for medical school that includes essays, letters of recommendation, standardized tests, so talking about those Step 1 boards and Step 2 of those board tests, and interviews. This process is run in a collaborative effort by the AAMC and a group called the National Resident Matching Program. There's your medical school application glossary. I tried to capture the most commonly used terms that you're going to probably hear us talking about in future episodes when I'm interviewing my colleagues. So let's now move on to the application process timeline. Applying to medical school requires time and planning. I'm going to use the example of a college junior preparing to apply to medical school and anticipating of enrolling right after they've completed their senior year of college. So let's start with the first semester of the junior year. If you have a pre-health advising office or a pre-med advisor, you should really begin working with them or attending any of their workshops in preparation for the upcoming application cycle. Oftentimes, advisors will host workshops or presentations specifically for juniors to assist in the preparation of the application process. Additionally, meeting with your advisor will help confirm that you're on track academically and you're in good shape for the upcoming application process. This is also a time when you can begin to put together your list of medical schools that you think you might want to apply to. We'll likely end up doing an entire show in the future regarding this topic, because there are a lot of things to consider when choosing medical schools. But again, this is where your advisor and the MSAR, which we talked about earlier, can be really helpful. On average, most applicants are applying to about 16 medical schools. Now, there is some strategy to this in creating this list, so this is a very important step. Let's move on to the second semester of the junior year. Around late winter to early spring is a good time to begin working on the drafts of your personal statement and to begin making a plan for when you think you might want to start taking the MCAT and when you want to start thinking about carving out that time it's going to take to study for the MCAT. I mean, remember, this is a big test. The MCAT website lists all the administration dates for the year, so this will allow you to kind of map out a plan. Most people take the test in May, June, July, and even early August. Obviously, there are other administration dates, but the timing of having a completed application is incredibly important. So the earlier the MCAT score is available to medical schools, the better. But keep this in mind. Don't sacrifice the time it takes to prepare for this test just to rush through it and get this step out of the way. Again, go back to looking at the administration dates and thinking about what's a realistic time frame that you can carve out to dedicate to study for this test and have a realistic plan in place. The MCAS application opens in early May, and it is an entirely paperless application process. Early May is when you can get into the application, start to create an account, and begin working and saving in a cycle kind of like that. The earliest you can click submit is usually at the very end of May or around the 1st of June. Here's an insider tip. Look, no one gets a gold star for submitting their AMCAS application at 12:01 a.m. on the very first day the submit button becomes available. You want to know why they don't get a gold star? Because your application isn't sent to medical schools right away. In fact, your submitted application needs to go through the verification process at AMCAS, where they verify the information you entered into your application, in particular your academics. So as a part of the application process, you'll need to have official transcripts from your college sent to AMCAS. And the AMCAS guide lays out this process for you so you know how and where to have your registrar's office send these transcripts. The verification process at AMCAS can take anywhere from about 2 to 4 weeks. So this is where you have to build in this time. So even if you click submit at 12:01 on the first day the application becomes available, it might take 2 to 4 weeks to be verified. So to get back to that not so gold star moment, even if you submit on the first day, medical schools don't get your processed application, and we don't get our first data download until the end of June. Once we get to that summer break between the junior year and the senior year of June, July, and August, this is when your processed application is usually delivered to medical schools' databases, and then secondary applications begin to be sent to you. You will use this time to complete the secondary applications and then return them to the medical school. I recommend returning these secondary applications within about 2 weeks of receipt. Every medical school is going to have some parameters, and they'll share that with you in the details of their secondary application. But on average, I say get those back within about 2 weeks. Don't just sit on them because you're on summer vacation and expect that you're going to wait till September to finish those up. Get them out of the way before you get back to school, because, once you get back into school your senior year, you're going to be busy, and then you're going to still have these secondary applications hanging over your head. So get them out of the way while you're on summer break. Now, a completed application usually includes these components: a verified AMCAS application, the MCAT score is posted, all of the letters of recommendation have been submitted and received by AMCAS, and the secondary application has been returned to the medical schools, along with the associated secondary fees have been paid. Once medical schools receive your completed application, it will be placed in a queue to be screened by that school, where they will ultimately decide if they want to invite you for an interview, reject your application, or sometimes you might be placed on hold for a potential future interview, just depending on the school and how they do their screening process. The screening process may take place immediately, or it might take a while for them to get to your application, so you really need patience in this process. So beginning in the fall of the senior year is when interviews usually take place. Some schools begin interviewing around the end of August and go all the way through February. Some schools even go interview into March. So again, very school specific and school dependent. It's possible that your interviews could be sprinkled out over the course of 6 months, or they might happen to take place over the course of a couple months. This part of the process is really unpredictable, and it just ultimately depends on how the school is getting their decisions back to you. The first acceptance offers can't be released by medical schools until October 15th. So if you had interviews at the end of August or in September, you won't be able to get a final decision from them until at least October 15th. After October 15th, medical schools can release their acceptance decisions as frequently as they like. It really depends on how their admissions committee process works. Some medical schools do rolling admissions, which means they release decisions on a frequent basis, while others practice non-rolling admissions, meaning they have set dates of when they release their decisions. So again, very school specific. If you are accepted, this will also trigger an additional calendar of sorts regarding the financial aid process. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that right now. I just want to focus on the application process itself. If you are accepted and going into the second semester of your senior year, you'll be wrapping up your undergraduate courses and requirements for graduation and beginning the decision-making process for where you'll be attending medical school. If you are fortunate to have been accepted to more than one medical school, you will find a lot of medical schools host revisit or second look weekend events in order to have you back to their school so that you can see the school again under different circumstances, meaning you won't have the nervousness of an interview day going on. You get to come back in a different environment and probably see things a little with a different lens on those days. Oftentimes, these events will allow you to learn about the school's programs and opportunities, meet current students and faculty, and experience activities and sites in that school city. So there can be really fun weekends and fun events to get back to. Accepted students have to make their final decision by April 30th of their senior year. Then pre-matriculation activities can begin, sometimes in May or June, but this is where you'll start to begin completing requirements for that medical school to which you plan to attend. And by requirements, I mean paperwork, immunization and health records need to be sent to them. Transcripts from your undergraduate institutions are collected by the medical school. So there's a whole list of things that medical schools are going to start to want to collect from you after that decision date in preparation for starting school later down the road. Most medical schools begin in August, but some schools do begin in July. So you could have an abbreviated summer vacation after graduation. Whew, there you go. There's a general overview of the medical school application process. I think I need a break after that. As I said earlier, the application process is very long. It requires a lot of attention to detail and an enormous amount of organization, as you can tell just from this brief overview, and a healthy dose of patience. I realize this application process explanation seems a little daunting, but just know this. Every year, there are about 22,000 successful applicants going to medical school, so it is an achievable goal. You can do this. Okay, I think that covers everything that I wanted to get out of this episode. Again, I wanted to provide you with a general overview of the lingo and the application process overview. Now, are there some terms or phrases that we use that I didn't talk about? Sure. Did I include every minute detail and nuance of the application process? Not necessarily. But again, this is a foundation to set the stage for future episodes of this show. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the process, then I'd recommend you spend some time looking through the AMCAS resources, and if you have one, meet with an advisor. But until the next episode, thank you for listening, and just know the next time you hear me, I'll be having a conversation with one of my medical school admissions friends. We'll see you then.